Welcome to Sisterhood Checkin. I am your author and coach, Nadira Lewis, and it is Friday. Woo! I am excited to be here with you guys yet another Friday. And I'm excited because I got a guest that I absolutely love to broadcast with. I'm telling you, he is not only a great friend, a big brother, but he's also my coach also. So I'm excited because every time we get together and we begin to do things like what we're getting ready to do, I just really love what God does in the midst of us. I just love the energy. We flow together. It just seems like that when we come together as a team, that God definitely is always glorified. So I'm excited. I cannot wait to dialogue with my special guest today, Thomas Taylor III, visionary coach. And I know he's got so much that God has placed on his heart. And it is Black History Month. And I'm excited that we get to take at least 1 month out of the year that we get to acknowledge some people that have already gone before us, that have paved the way for us to be able to do things that we weren't always able to do back in the 50s. And even the 40s. So I'm grateful to God that we have been able to learn by watching and reading and studying other people. But you know what I'm most proud of? I'm most proud of the fact that we get to be a part of the history in the making too, because we're all a part of his story, and that his person is Jesus Christ. So we get to be a part of his story. We get to share all of the things, wonderful things that God has done in our life through a broadcast like Sisterhood Check-In, to be able to help the next generation that's coming behind us, and that they can be able to see our life as an example and see some of the things that we have gone through and what we continuously overcome, so that they can also be encouraged. So with that being said, if you are watching me on YouTube, make sure you hit the subscribe button, hit the notification button, so that you can be notified every time I upload a new video. And if you are watching me on Instagram, if you are watching me on TikTok, if you are watching me on Facebook, all of the social media stuff, make sure you click like and share. If you are blessed by the content that I've been basically sharing every week. So before I actually bring up my special guest, I'm going to go ahead and play this video real quick. And I want you to call up your girlfriends and tell them Sisterhood Check-In is on the air. And I'll see you right after this.
Sometimes it's not enough to be reminded that Jesus hasn't left you or forgotten you. We need to declare it over ourselves, over others. No matter the season you may find yourself in, no matter the depths of darkness you're wading through, you can join him in declaring the truth that God is light upon your feet, whether or not you can see the next step, that God is your strength, even though the weight of life seems to be crushing you down. And that when your job, your marriage, your relationship, your health feels like it's coming to a dead end, there is only one God that can make dead things live again. These are his promises, and they're the only thing you need to declare over your life. So as you step into this next season or this next moment, you can declare that God's not done with you. He's just getting started. You can declare that the good work that he has started in you, he will surely complete it. You can declare that the same God that parted the seas goes before you, goes behind you. You can declare these promises over your life, over your family's life, over the people passing on the street. You can declare these truths over every circumstance, over every season of your life. You can declare that every day belongs to him and every new breath belongs to him. Because we have the power of a living God living inside of us. And this is our declaration.
Woo, I tell you, every time let me tell you something, guys. I never, ever get tired of watching that because I'm always encouraged because when you have the power of the living God on the inside of you, you'll be surprised at some of the things that you'll accomplish because I'm telling you, just looking at things in my own flesh, it's easy to get discouraged. It's easy to throw in a towel, but I'm so grateful that God is always reminding us of his power that he has on the inside of us. So guys, round of applause. Shouting to the left, shouting to the right. I am excited to bring back no stranger to the Sisterhood Check-in podcast. My favorite person in the world, Thomas T. Taylor the third. Welcome to Sisterhood Check-in. Wow, I'm always excited.
Everybody doing well.
Wow, T, every time we get together and we do a broadcast, let me tell you something. I be so super excited because you are like a whole vibe. You hear what I'm saying? Like T, you are a whole vibe, and I'm just always truly grateful to be able to have you on, whether it's Sisterhood Check-in or whether we just doing dinner with the coaches or we just doing our own thing. We are just a dual team, and I'm really grateful, and I'm excited even about today's topic because we have done a lot of talking in our area of coaching. We've been helping different people in this particular area, and so I'm really excited to dig into your brain and find out what you think. Because this kind of collides right with what you do and what God has called you to do, and it's Black History Month, so I want to acknowledge that it's Black History Month, and we are a part of history too in the making. And so, T, there are some things that you're going to be doing that's going to be affecting the next generation also. And we're going to talk about that and how it affects. The topic is when trauma affects your identity. And we know all too well.
Yeah.
Really quick. So I want you to kind of talk to the people that may have not watched you on Sisterhood Check-in, which I hardly believe that nobody knows Taylor the third is, about who you are and how you grew up and why this topic that I basically chose. Why does this hit home for you?
Man, well, first I want to say appreciate you. Thank you once again, my sister, for having me on. It's always a plum-pleasing pleasure being out here on the broadcast with you and your listeners. I'm always honored, to come and join you on the stage. You're doing a marvelous job. I'm so proud of you.
Oh, thank you.
I remember the days when you didn't think and you didn't know that you could do it. You know what I mean? But you still press forward through all and any adversity, and you still got it done. So we applaud you. Great job. Great job.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm still doing it too.
So your topic is, when trauma affects you.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the challenge. Say it again.
When trauma affects your identity.
Yeah. Part of the challenge is sometimes, unfortunately, we normalize, behavior that's not really indicative of our future, right? So when things are unfortunately kind of passed down, right, in terms of it's history, right? Things that happen in our families where we don't really stop certain things because nobody wants to tell the truth about the situation. Yeah,
Oh boy.
so it caught. Hey, this is that night. This is
Oh
that night.
boy.
You know, when things happen that we don't have anything to do with, but we become beneficiaries of it, and
Mm.
then unfortunately, it's really, not per se normal per se, but it's normalized
Mhm.
because nobody want to address the particular issues that happen,
Mm.
right? And
Mm.
then the offsprings, which is the children, have to
Mhm.
deal with that trauma, and that's really what it is. And then it impacts our future so much so when it's happening, nobody really thinks about the future.
Mm.
Unfortunately, the generations where these things actually originated,
Mhm.
they only were concerned about then, themselves, and now.
Yeah.
Versus
Yeah.
how does it affect, generations unborn? So for
Mm.
myself, again, I'm certified coach. I do, visionary coaching. I kind of really hone in on accountability. That's real big for me. Accountability coaching
Mm.
as well to
Mm.
help hold individuals accountable to the things that you say that you want. Been doing
Mm.
Facebook Lives for 3 going on 4 years. I have a nonprofit organization called Grown Up Without a Father. The president and CEO, where I help individuals deal with the trauma and impact of growing up without your father, whether it be your
Mm.
father made a different decision, or you could have
Mhm.
passed away of some things of that nature, but still kind of you're growing up in a situation where the individual
Mm.
who's supposed to edify you, Nadira. You're beautiful, you're smart, intelligent. You can do anything that you put your mind to, made a different decision. He's not
Mm.
there, for the young
Mm.
young girl or the young man, right? So we kind of, get into those particular things. And then coaching, for me,
Yeah.
it's a gift. You know what I mean? I didn't realize
Mhm.
that it was quantified as coaching because I've been doing it for so many years, so many decades, just helping people, right?
Yeah.
Inspiring people, motivating people, helping people, guiding people, until I understood that there was a whole industry around that. And that's why I decided to become a certified coach.
Yeah. And I think what you said is so powerful because as adults, and I say that as an adult now, but as our parents were adults, it was the hush don't tell, you know,
Mhm.
were forced because of circumstances to have to deal with things because of economics. A lot of parents were, they didn't, even though there wasn't a lot of two parent households, especially in a black
Yeah,
family,
yeah,
and
yeah.
so we,
Facts.
especially, me raised up in a single mother's home, the mothers have to be tough. They have to be father and mother. And so most of the time when they're dealing with raising their children, love was second. Discipline was first. It was do this, do this.
Yes.
Love was an option. That was an entree. That wasn't the
Mhm.
foundation of, expressing that love was not the top of the list because look, we got to pay bills. Mama got to work. Mama got to do this.
Yeah.
But then once I became a parent and I wanted to change, especially when I
Mhm.
had like, I think it was after my second child, I really realized when I had my first son, I was like, oh boy, I've got to now I know now, I'm good at knowing how to be a girl mom because you
Yeah.
know, but now it's like to switch positions and raise sons is a different thing to try to balance. I was listening. You got to balance love and discipline, all that stuff. And remember, I was listening to. I don't know if you ever heard of him, but his name is Jason Wilson, and he's on the Craze podcast, and he was talking about how with his lifestyle he grew up, and you know, there was always pressure to be some type of to where emotional, emotional. Like, he wasn't mom. He needed to be I want to be able to get it done, do it. I want to be that ride or die chick. I want to be, and sometimes you ride and die to the grave sometimes.
Yeah.
Because you don't realize that we have to deal with the trauma that we either seen or experienced in our home so that we can be able to navigate through life. And I'm realizing as an adult that when you tend to ignore the things that are causing havoc, in your external relationships, when you're starting to not deal with things that are affecting how you parent, it is a big deal, because now your children grow up and they repeat the same thing that you had to live through. And that can be really difficult. This is also, what we consider to be the love month, right? So everybody during at least one time out of the month, or maybe two during the holidays, are intentional about demonstrating some sort of love, right? How can we, with all the stuff that's going on, all the changes that's taking place, how do we balance, if it's even possible, being able to walk in love, right? Being that some people may have never even really experienced it.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, for the most part, at a certain point in our lives, we have to draw a line in the sand, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we have to make a decision and make a choice. It's almost like a fork in the road, right?
Yeah.
Which way will you go? Like, what's going to
Mm-hmm.
drive you to go a particular way? Not deciding
Yeah.
if one way is right or wrong, right?
Right.
It's just we have to choose a path. And sometimes,
Yeah.
unfortunately, we choose the path of least resistance,
Mm.
which is exactly
Mm.
how we grew up, right? So that's when you get into the
Mm.
position where we start to perpetuate the
Wow.
cycle, right? Where we normalize dysfunction. Why? Because according to us,
Mm.
well, I turned out okay, Nadira. You turned out okay. It's
Mm.
what we say to ourselves. But
Yep.
but it's dysfunctional that we normalize and we say, okay, well, did we?
Mm.
Did we? Right? So to directly answer your question, we have to put ourselves in a position where we got to make a decision on how do we want our offsprings to live. Right? So for example, we was talking, myself, Carolyn, and my daughter Monasia, we was talking the other day, and they were doing track 200 in Change Church for new members.
Mm.
And that track was about really dealing with your deep rooted issues and challenges with your mother and father,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
It's a deep track. Or other, if you was raised by grandparent or aunt or something
Mm.
to that effect, they got other. But so Carolyn and Monasia was saying, like, the individuals that was in the class was really
Mm.
pouring out how certain traumas in their past impacted their relationships with their parents. So Monasia was like, Dad, she said, I almost was thinking like I wasn't in the right class.
Oh, wow.
She said, because all the stuff that they were dealing with and talking about,
Mm.
she said, I never experienced. I
Oh,
said, that's
wow.
because your mother and myself, we drew a line in the sand and we made a
Mm-hmm.
decision that the dysfunction stops here.
Mm-hmm.
So you wouldn't experience the trauma, pain,
Mm-hmm.
dysfunction that we experienced. So we took the
Yeah.
hit, we took the grunt of it, and we made a
Mm.
decision not to perpetuate it forward. So
Yeah.
now you can stand here at 24 years old and make that statement. She
Wow.
said one girl was like, my father always addresses me, a particular way as his daughter, but then talks about, the accolades and stuff, man. So we just kind of, talking about that. And she was like, I really don't have a problem with that. But that young lady had an issue with
Mhm.
that though. Because she felt
Mm.
any kind of way that she wasn't enough. Right. So we
Wow.
just explained to my daughter that what happens is because our childhood was a certain way. Again, we made a conscious decision to be a two-parent household to give our offsprings a better chance than we had. And again, I was raised as a single mom. Talked to my mom today. She just turned 81 years old. Yesterday, still kicking, still doing a thing. So again, and we know it, and we always say it, they did the best they could with what they
Yeah.
had. We always say
Yeah.
that, right? So we really
Yeah.
can't fault them per se, because it was a different era. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Right? We know a little bit of something different based upon how it made us feel.
Mm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So based upon that, those are the things that we should utilize in ourselves to give our children a better opportunity, because the world we currently live in now is totally different than 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. It's totally different. And if we take if we take all of the old philosophies and try to perpetuate it now, it's going to be different. Now, from a fundamental basis, a baseline of discipline. Oh yeah. Old school. Oh, we got them beat all day long and twice on Sunday. From a disciplinary standpoint, oh yeah, respect and discipline, hands down, because it's totally different nowadays. Totally different, right? So again, what gives us the opportunity to change things, Nadira, is like yourself. You made a
Yeah.
conscious decision, even as a single parent, to give your children a better opportunity in terms of love, caring, right? Being inclusive, including your children. See, when we was coming up, we was never included in grown-up decisions.
Mm-mm.
Nah,
Mm-mm.
we couldn't even be in the same room.
Sure couldn't. You would open up your mouth if you want to. You get that
Nope,
backhand. What's that favorite
nope.
saying? Stay in the child's place. Stay in the child's
Yeah,
place.
totally,
But the
totally
difference,
different.
but staying in a child's place, understanding it now, was just their way of keeping us innocent from what was going on, what was taking place. So the less we knew, the easier it was for us to maintain. But at the same time, it didn't really give us an opportunity to really understand how to navigate, especially when you got two parents or two people arguing. They're not, the only thing that we saw being taught is how to cuss folks out, how to put people in their place, whether you're doing it physically or whether you're doing it, verbally. But I think I think the key thing that you said is you and Carolyn made a decision, right? Early on, right? There's a lot of people make those decisions when because everybody, how it is when you first find out you're pregnant, family, you ecstatic, you got all these plans, right? And then your plans don't wind up going the way you planned. And what happens is you wind up having to, depending on the type of lifestyle that you guys had, then what happens is the children suffer, because now the parent that's in the home with the children has to turn, especially if she's a mom, has to turn into, the survival mode, right? And now she's no longer, nurturing kids. Now she's moving into a masculine role, right? And now she's all under the pressure of the household bills and trying to take care of stuff. And I think what's happened is it's easier for people that are single and have children. It's not that they don't have issues. I think what happens is that trauma is undealt with, and some people don't feel they don't even know that they have trauma they're dealing with. They don't even realize it. Some people make an excuse for this, sit back and just can't stop. The goal is to stop, and I think what it is, deal with it. I think we'll have healthy relationships regardless of our past. I'm not saying that having trauma will completely prevent you, right? You have to allow it to prevent you from healthy relationships. If you deal with it, which means dealing with it is you have to heal. Stop jumping relationships. People are scared to be by themselves. I noticed that struggle with taking time to be alone, deal with issues. It's easier to jump from one woman to the next, because now I don't have to deal with it until nobody's there. right? Because now you don't have a crutch. If we deal with our own issues, whether we're, single or relationship, we can stop a lot of dysfunction.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah,
really believe.
that's why so many marriages was lost during COVID, because the world stopped
Mm,
moving, right? And now you got to deal with the person that you made that choice with, and then a lot
mm.
of cats was just tapping out. You know
Happened
what
to
I
that
mean?
other spouse, for better or for
Yeah,
worse.
yeah. So I mean, but that's a good point, right? And I think that's where, for me, that's where coaching comes in, right? And
Yeah.
the reason why I say coaching, because we talk about coaching. Coaching is a future focused goal or action orientated process. It focuses on the future, but also many times, people in our community, they attribute a coach to a couch. What I mean by that is they think that a coach is a therapist and you're going to sit on a couch. Well, guess what? We don't do couches, right?
Yes, we don't do couches.
Unless it's mandated, right? It's a part of a court order or something, like, we're kind of forced to. We don't sit on people's couches. It's just kind of not what we do
Yes,
overall.
yes,
Now some do. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying all, but the
yeah.
majority, this is not what we do with our issues, right? So, but we encourage it,
Hmm.
but that's just not what we do.
Hmm.
So if they attribute a couch with a coach, they say to themselves, why would I pay somebody to do something that I already know? The challenge is,
Mm.
with a coach holds you accountable. That's why I talked about accountability coaching, right?
Hmm.
So, for example, if you take any individual who actually excelled on a high level, from your Michael Jordans, your Kobe Bryants, LeBron, Oprah, Tiger Woods, Venus and Serena's Williams, all of those people, there's one thing
Hmm.
that they have in common, Nadira. They all have a coach,
Hmm.
which
Hmm.
enabled them to function at a higher level, right?
Mm.
Michael Jordan wasn't winning championships. Then he went and got the best strength and conditioning coach to get his body right, because his body
Mm.
wasn't lasting in the series. They was getting beat by the Detroit Pistons, man. They was just getting beat up.
Yeah.
After he did that conditioning, he started doing championships. When Kobe Bryant came into the league, he said, hey, man, I want the same trainer that Michael Jordan has to
Mm.
train his body, to condition his body to withstand the season and the playoffs. If you look at a tennis match when Serena and Venus is playing tennis, and when Serena was doing her thing out there winning championships, when she messes up on the tennis court, where does the camera pan? The
Mm.
camera goes to her coach who's in the
A
stands.
coach. Yeah.
Why? Because they want the reaction of the coach when his client who's on the tennis court is not doing what he coached her on. So much
Mm.
so, one time they threw the coach out because they said her coach was giving her certain signals
Oh,
on
wow.
what to move, how to move, and what to do.
Hmm.
So they
Yeah.
kicked them out of the tournament. But
Oh,
but my
wow.
point is, for those individuals who are operating on their highest level, they have a coach. Tiger
Yeah.
Woods. Tiger Woods lost the Masters one year. He went back to his coach, and his coach changed his swing. This Tiger Woods
Hmm.
now changed his swing, and he won the Masters the next year.
Yeah.
So we go through our lives trying to figure out, almost like spraying and praying, which way to go, what to do. And there's individuals out there that can help guide us and coach us to get to that level that we say we want to acquire, Nadira.
Right.
Right? Despite the trauma that we're talking about, despite all of that, right? It
Hmm.
doesn't it doesn't go away, but despite
Mm.
that, why? Because if you have one person that made a choice and they didn't succeed because of that trauma, I'll show you 5 that did,
Mm.
because they made a decision. Their trauma didn't go away. Their trauma didn't change. and made a decision.
Wow.
Sometimes we don't move and we don't get to the level that God has already ordained for us to get to because we don't make that decision. It's not
Yeah.
that we can't. We just don't make that decision.
Yeah. And I think it's pride. I think pride is a sometimes you ever run into people when you try to tell them something, what is the first thing that they say? I know.
Yeah. Yeah.
The first thing they always tend to say is, I know. I know. You try to coach them, you try to tell them something, and it's like, I know, I got this, I already been there, done that. And I think what happens is I think people get frustrated with process.
Mm-hmm.
I think people get frustrated with the process of life because you get weary in the beginning, right? In the beginning, you're fighting to survive, right? Now you're just your goal is, I just want to get past this. How many people say that? I just want to get past this. I just want to just keep going. But what happens in the process is what gives there's tools, wisdom, and lessons that God gives you in the process that carries you, that makes the journey to the destination a little bit easier.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't take away the pain. It just turns the pain into fuel. It turns the pain into motivation to change. When it makes me think about David when he said he learned obedience through the things that he said. And when you think about what David said, it's like, man, and I think about my own life, how many things that I had to go through in order to realize, okay, that's probably not the right thing to do. That's probably not the right way to go. But when you refuse wisdom, then experience becomes your number one teacher, right? And I used to tell my kids all the time, you're going to learn a little bit from both. You're going to learn from experience and you're going to learn from wisdom, but you want to try to get most of your experience. You want to learn mostly through wisdom because it lessens the amount of blows that you get, right? You might come out with a little less hickeys and maybe your bones won't be broken. Maybe you won't be disfigured, hopefully. But what I've learned is I was sitting down and I said, man, I think that was it. It was the process. It's because there's a lot of things that everybody talks about the beginning when they go through stuff. Everybody talk about, I went through this, I went through that, and I'm going through this and I'm going through that. And then you got those that talk about, on the other side of the extreme, oh yeah, I came out, and they paint this beautiful picture about, to make you think that coming through whatever they went through was a breeze, right?
Yeah.
But nobody sits down and talk people through the process, the areas of your life where you felt stuck, the areas of your life where you failed in love, in relationships, in parenting, in different areas. Nobody talk about the processes. And so what happens is you have people that look at people that seem to look like they're perfect, right? Mm-hmm. And that they don't go through anything because they have not been transparent enough. And transparent don't mean that because there are some lessons that are unexplainable. You can't really, it's just, you just know it as you go through. Right. Yeah. But there are some lessons in the process that you take with you once you come out, and you can say, it's funny because when I thought about when I was homeless for that time frame, and I was living in the shelter when me and my first husband had divorced. And I remember thinking to myself, like, oh my gosh, now I have to go through all this. I had a house, and why do I have to sit in here and live through it? And I realized I don't like process. And I realized that is what contributed to my complaining, because instead of me looking at the fact that even God can cause this to work together for my good, all I was seeing was, I just want to get to the end. And then when I got to the end, I was in the times like, Lord, if you get me through this, I'll promise you know how we do. We come with all the promises. I promise I'll do this, and I promise I'll do that. And then what happens is you get out and you just want to go, you don't even want to think about the process. You just want to focus on telling people where you are. And I think the process is where God wants us to help people, especially that's where we come in as coaches, right? As we come in and we help people that are stuck in the process and say, I know you anxious to get here, but let's deal with this. I know you want to be over here, but let's deal with this. Let's get this done, because if you don't deal with it and you move on, and you can, right? You can move on, but if you don't deal with this, you're going to circle back in another relationship. You're going to circle back, right? It's because you got to go with God. Sometimes he allow you. We don't always get to take. And I said, you've heard me say this before. It's like some lessons we don't get to take twice. Some tests we don't get to take twice, and so we want to make sure that as much as possible that we're looking at. I told my daughter this earlier, because we always having like in-depth conversations. I said, if we look at trials and the things that we go through in our trauma experiences, if we could change our perspective a little bit, it can probably help us get out of survival mode, or to help us to kind of push through it a little faster. Because when you change your perspective about what you're going through, you tend to not be as complaining. You tend to not be, it don't mean you may not be frustrated, but you tend to look at it as, it's not going to always be like this. And that kind of helps you get through the process a little bit quicker. But when you murmur and you complain and you just always got something negative to say about the situation, then what happens is you prolong the change that needs to take place, and you've got to renew your mind, and it takes time to do that. It don't happen overnight.
Yeah, that's Romans. Yeah. Yep, 100%. And that trauma, what happens is, you mentioned a lot of key things, and I attribute it to knowledge, right? So learn knowledge. So trauma, what happens is it puts us in a position where we just kind of stay to try to understand how we got there, right?
Yeah.
That's that learn knowledge. You go over in your head. And what happens is when we have to use the application, when we have to apply that information, is where the wheels fall off the wagon, right? That's why a coach is so relative, because a coach helps you apply the information and the knowledge and the level of understanding to help you move past that trauma, right? Because in your mind, you just keep pressing play. You just keep pressing play, and you just rehearse. It goes over and over and over, right? But there's some things that we need to do in order to apply certain things that we learned. And then let's talk about our gifts, right? Inside of all of that, we all have gifts. But what happens, I always talk about it, we always move into our skills. Why? Because the skills pays the bills. Right? But there's everybody under the sound of my voice has a gift that you were born with. It may be buried under that trauma, but if you challenge yourself, right? If you put yourself in a position where you acquire some assistance, you can start to apply those things, and then somebody can teach you how to monetize that gift. So you'll never feel like you worked a day in your life.
Yeah.
And sometimes, and I'll talk about this in a minute, sometimes our future, right? Our gifts come out of our pain. They birth from that trauma.
They're discovered through the pain. Yeah. They're discovered because it's your gift is what God has given you to operate in naturally, right? That supports helping, because your gift is an answer for somebody else. Is to help somebody else, right? Your gift has a twofold part to it, where you benefit because you're encouraged. How many people have you encouraged and you felt great for helping change somebody's life? Not just, there's a lot of emphasis on the monetary side of it, but there's a satisfaction that comes when you're in the will of God and you're doing what comes natural that God has gifted you with, right? It's a fulfillment that comes that can't be explained, right? And I think what happens is there's a lot of pursuit there. I mean, oh gosh, we live in a time where everything is pursuit for our own benefit, right? And when we're in that pursuit for our own benefit, then what happens is we miss right? How much of what God has given us is supposed to impact other people, right? When I think about I think I was listening to somebody and they were saying something about they were working a particular place and that they realized that they were so content, right? No, I know what it was. I was listening to Napoleon Hill, and he was talking about in one of his books, he was saying how he took a job, and he took that job and how the job was paying less, but it gave him an opportunity to do what he loved to do, right? Versus being able to do something that I think what happens is we think that everything that we do is we so self-centered in our pursuit for contentment, not realizing that contentment comes from being able to pour into other people, right? Contentment comes when you take the focus off of you, right? That's how I believe that's how we discover our gifts. We're not, most of the time we're searching for what God has already put in us, and sometimes we don't even realize it because it comes naturally when you give and focus on other people. And I think people give up in their pursuit of trying to do what they feel like or they think God has called them to do, because they're still dealing with the trauma. They're still me centered. They're still dealing with what has happened to them. So they don't even see, right, that they are a whole blossoming flower on this side. All they see over here is I'm going through this, I'm dealing with that, and that's where their focus goes, right? That's what Satan did in the Garden of Eden. Tried to get Eve to focus on everything else but what God had already made provision for them to know. He wanted her to think this was that God, what God said wasn't enough. You got it twisted. It's not enough. When we've put so much focus on monetary value when it comes to our gifts that we tend to forget that it's twofold, which means while you're at a place where you're helping other people, in return, the twofold is you're becoming content, right? You start to operate as a servanthood to when you're a servant to your gift. There's a twofold response to it. But when you're me centered and you're thinking about how I'm going to benefit and how I'm going to do this, then that becomes your pursuit. And then you're struggling to do what God meant for you to do naturally.
Yeah, definitely. You know, there's always a duality, right? And inside of what you're saying, I think sometimes that becomes a challenge. You know, how can we do both? How can we do what we feel that our Creator has given us the gift to do, and then take that gift to the marketplace? See, unfortunately, sometimes when you brought up in particular, religious beliefs, those two don't mix, right? It's either one or the other. It's either or, right? But there's a way to do both, though, from a kingdom perspective.
Absolutely,
right? Because there's a whole lot of scriptures that backs that up in terms of understanding how to do kingdom business, and inside of your gifts, you can create a business and be okay with that based upon what you feel that your Creator has put inside of you.
That's so true. But here's the thing. Most people know, we hear the word kingdom, right? It's popular in Christianity, kingdom, kingdom, kingdom. But that's like living in the United States, right? Or living in another country that operates as a kingdom and not know the protocol. Right. So we're trying to live kingdom principles without knowing the protocol. Right. In America, where we're more democratic, right? We get to choose our president. We get to choose how we do things. When you're living in other countries that are monarch countries, right? Where the king and the queen is the one that determines the protocol on how things are done, then what happens is, in order for you to benefit, right, you have to learn the protocol. And I think what happens is it's hard for us because we focus so much on achieving, getting, that we don't realize that the Bible tells us to seek first the kingdom, right? And the reason why he tells us to seek first is because and this is just what I feel, right? I believe that when we pursue God and his way of doing things, right? Then we start to discover things about us that just begin to flow. And then everything we need, according to Matthew 6, is added to us, because now your goal and your focus is not necessarily on what you want. It's on, I'm focusing on him, right? And his way, his protocol, right? And as I do that, because God knows the things that I need and desire, right? They're added to you. He positions you to be able to get, because he already knows what we need. He knows that we need things in the earth realm, right? To be able to function. He knows, because you got to think about it. With the Jewish tradition, they grow up learning, right? Who God is. That was their culture. The Gentiles, us, the people that didn't grow up as Jews, we didn't learn what the Jews learned. It's not until we come to Christ that we start to realize, oh, okay, maybe I'm doing things a little different. The Jews, they're raised, right, from birth. Right? They're raised from birth how to do different things to honor God. Us that are non-Jew, we grew up with, you just do what I say, not what I do. You do what I say, and then when you get to a point to where life happens and you start to, form a relationship with God, and you begin to read and study his word, you realize that, okay, if I focus on him, this is something I observe with my own eyes. I've watched people who are successful in business, in parenting, in contentment. I've watched, right, certain people, right? And let me tell you something, that consider themselves to be believers, right? I've watched them, and I can almost, and this is why I came to this conclusion, because when I looked at their lives, they're doing what God called them to do, right? And as a result of their obedience to pursuing God, they have everything that most people pursue. It comes to them effortlessly, right? So what that showed me was, I'm an observer. I'm a one. I'm like, I don't like to learn the hard way too many times, right? I don't like learning the hard way too many times. So what I realize is that if I want peace, right? If I want to be content, right? Then I have to figure out what they're doing, because like you said, we don't have coaches. We don't have people. Coaches are there to come alongside of you and guide you, right? And show you which direction that you need to go. So when I look at people and I say, oh, okay, so this is what they did. And when you talk to some of them, they're like, yeah, I really, this was just, I wasn't even asking for this. It just, I was pursuing. But when you look at people, especially modern day Christians, we tend to be so goal oriented on things that God becomes that having a relationship with God becomes the secondary thing. And so we are more goal driven than we are relationship driven. And it shows up in every area of our life. Now we spend most of our time trying to take care of ourselves, and we spend this much time with God, right? We got 24 hours in a day. We're sleeping 8 of them, sometimes 4. If you work in 2-3 jobs, you sleeping for 4 hours, and you spending 16 to 20 hours on getting to work, working, and getting home. And we got this much time. But I am seeing, it's just my observation, when I see people who are doing what God tells them to do, they tend to work smarter, right? And they tend to and I started to think, I was like, okay, hold on, wait a minute. I got this all wrong. And when I started to apply those same principles, my life got easier. And people will look at me and say, oh, you just this, and I'm like, oh my God, if you understood this, that's why I'm like so passionate about it, because my life got easier, right? Doesn't mean that I'm where I want to be completely, but when you slow down enough to switch directions and follow the leading of the Holy Spirit, you'll be amazed at how much faster of a result that you'll get, right? And you and I talked about this, even the other day, and I said, you know what, T, I said, I realized that when you slow down and you go after him, right? He shows you how to govern your life in such a way you learn how to prioritize him first. Then your life gets easier because now you're not in so much pursuit of things. Things are just added to you. I feel like I work less and make more now than I did when, and it's the subtle things. Now I'm able to sleep better. I get great sleep, right? I wake up, the peace is there. The peace is there. And I can see things. It's like clarity comes. We always ask him for clarity. God, I need clarity. I need clarity. But clarity comes as a result of being able to sit still in his presence and allowing him to direct you, right? Satan tries to make us think you need to do it all. You don't need God. You do this. You don't need him. And yeah, I've seen what that has gotten me.
Man,
No thanks.
because obedience is better than sacrifice, right? So the things that you talked about, they're universal laws, they're universal principles, right? Because
Yeah.
God says he's no respecter of person, right? If you follow these rules, if you follow these laws, you will get the same thing that this other person received. Because you're following things that he set in place for us to be successful, to be fruitful, multiply, beneficial, all these particular outcomes, right? But they don't come first though, and that's the challenge.
Yes.
Right? We have to put ourselves in a position to constantly understand that and give in order to ultimately receive, right? So you're talking about trauma, and my part of my story is I grew up without my father, in New York. That's kind of like a little bit of a so what if you raise in that northern hemisphere, New York,
Oh, I know.
Pennsylvania, that area.
Oh, do I know?
Reconnected with my father after 20 years, right? Found out that my father was a junior. And then my wife kind of challenged me because I know that my name wasn't correct, right? I grew up as Thomas Searles, but my father's name was Taylor. So I wanted to change my name, and my wife challenged me, well, before you do that, I want you to find your father. I'm like, find my who?
Wow.
Like, I met the dude one time, man. This is I'm 38 years of age now at that time, man. Like, I met the dude when I was 18 years old.
Wow.
Right out, before I graduated from high school. First time I ever met the cat. I find my father. Like, okay. So I just took up on an offer. But in order to do that, though, the reason why I'm saying that is because I couldn't do that in the flesh. I had to go to another level spiritually to understand what that meant.
Wow.
Just like finding a needle in a haystack. I don't know if the dude is dead, alive. I don't know anything about this cat, man. But when she said that, it sparked something in me because I was so adamant because I understood what he told me.
Yeah.
So it was a challenge. Ultimately, I make a long story short because it'll be in my book that I'm working on. Found my father in Orangeburg, South Carolina. Called him up one day. It was a Friday the 13th, 2004. Called him up. I said, "Hello, may I speak to Thomas?" He said, "Speaking." He said, "Who's this?" I said, "This is Thomas Searles," which was my current name at the time. He was like, "Nah, I don't know no Thomas Searles." It's like, "Yeah, I figured you would say that." I said, "Do you remember a young lady named Renita? They called her Rita." Quiet, man. That's my mom's name. Quiet, man. He was like, "Yeah." I said, "Yeah, well, I'm her son." Man, that dude almost dropped the phone, man. Yeah, he almost dropped the phone. I didn't get my number.
It wasn't me.
Don't worry about that. It wasn't me. Yeah, 20 years. Hey, I just want to call and let you know that I'm good. I'm married, got 2 kids and a wife. Maybe one day, I'll bring them down there and meet you. Like, wow, man, I haven't spoken to you in a while. Yeah, it's been a long time. He said, "But how'd you get my number?" I say, "Hey, that's not important, man." So we talked a bit, and I hung up the phone. And then kind of fast forward, took my family out there, met a grandfather that I never met before. I never knew Nadira. I got 2 sisters and a brother on that side. My brother just passed away last year. My pops passed
Oh,
away in
wow.
2017.
Yeah.
But there was some things that I learned though, and I learned that my father was a junior. I didn't know that, right?
Mm.
So then, you know, I was 30 years of age, and God put on me, said that I don't know any man that I've met that I know that would change their name in midstream at 38 years
Yeah.
of age.
Really?
But if you do, you ought to write a book about it.
Unless you're in debt and you don't want
Show
nobody.
me what is to be called, right? And then I pursued that, and then we legally changed my name because I was his firstborn son,
Mm.
right? So
Wow.
now when you get into the spiritual aspect of it, which is
Mm.
part of the same reason they fighting over there now, birthright,
Mm.
land, and all that stuff. It was
Mm.
I was born Thomas Taylor III.
Mm.
But based upon the trauma that my mother was dealing with my father,
Wow.
he chose
Wow.
to change that. Why? Because my pops
Wow.
was married with a family in Brooklyn, and he worked with my mother on Long Island. So my mom's was the chick on the side. Well, you know, you never supposed to get pregnant.
Mm.
You're on the side. Everybody know. Hey, everybody know. Getting
Wow.
pregnant's not in the deal. Because my mom's
Yeah.
knew. But he, you know,
Yeah.
I'm a divorce him. We're gonna get divorced. I mean, divorce my wife. I'm gonna be with you.
Mm-hmm.
You
Oh,
know,
yeah.
ain't nothing new under the sun, man.
Oh,
Right?
yeah.
But because of that trauma, she just gave me the name that she had at that particular time, Nadira.
Wow.
I lived my whole life under a fictitious name that didn't have nothing to do with me. So I made that
Wow.
decision, and it was official March 7th, 2005. This year is 20 years. I'm in the process.
Wow.
That's my goal, is to launch my book on March 7th, 2025. 20 years to the day where our name was changed based upon that trauma. And the reason why I'm bringing it up is because
Wow.
I didn't realize it, Nadira. When you go through that type of scenario, and those who are listening can understand, when I had to think back, when I had to actually petition the court to change my name, so I had to go through the story, Nadira.
Mm.
Nadira, I promise you, man, when I was writing, because I wrote it up myself, I was crying and crying and crying. I was purging because I never
Wow.
had to deal with that issue because it was so far deep in the back of my mind. But now I had to bring it to the forefront. And what happens is, as an adult, when those can understand, when you grew up without your father, you go through life just almost
Mm.
numb, right? But when you have to pause,
Wow.
and then when you have to look back, it wasn't until I looked back is when I realized maybe what I missed or how things could be. But when you're going through, you don't think about those things. But now I had to
Mm.
write about it, and I was crying and crying and purging, man, and purging, because it was just so deep for me, because I never
Wow.
really had to deal with it. But again, it was trauma to the point where I had to make a decision not to
Mm.
continuously perpetuate that lie, man.
It makes me think about, because I, even when you shared that story with me, it made me think, like, why was it, I thought about this a couple times, like, why was it important for him to have to change his name? And the more and more I hear you talk about it, and the thought came to me, is because in order for you to get what God has for you, you have to position yourself correctly. And positioning, oh, wow, I just thought about
Mm,
something.
mm, mm.
Positioning yourself correctly, right? Not only for inheritance, but accountability, right? Not necessarily accountability for you, but oh God, this is so wow. This just came to me. I'm thinking
Yeah,
this. Wow,
yeah,
I
it's
didn't realize how
incredible.
powerful this was, because
It's
you
incredible.
said your mother was a mistress, right? To your dad,
Yeah,
he was married. So it needed to be, you have, it's your birthright, right? To be, it's like for you, for her to take, we always think that we can shift everything in our lives, right?
yeah,
But you can't shift accountability, right?
yeah.
You can't push off accountability to other people. Your dad had to he had to acknowledge, right? He may have been living his life all that time. He was married, living his life all that time with his family, not being accountable for the son that he created. Now you're of age. Now you have to deal with the fact that you can move on with your life and do, but when God remembers, right? You have to be accountable for what you did. And now that with that accountability comes accountability, right? With that accountability comes a position. It's funny because this makes me think about, I don't know if you've been studying, but I was looking at something. I was watching on YouTube and it came across my screen, and it was about this young man that's supposed to be Jay-Z's son, right? And I was watching a documentary, and it was saying, and the guy was like, I just want my birth. I just want he wanted him to acknowledge. He didn't ask him for any money. He didn't. And then it's like, and then when I was listening to the story, because I was like, to me, I'm a type of person, I like to listen to the why. I feel like God gives me, the Bible says he gives us understanding in all things. That mean he give you understanding everybody's business, but I like to understand the why. It kind of helps me, I don't know what it is. I'm just always intrigued on the why people do what they do, right? What's the motivation? What's going on? So I'm listening to this interview, and I'm listening to the lady that's been in his life, which is his mother's. She was like the godmother or whatever, or somebody that was there to kind of help her out while she was young. And as I'm listening to the story, and I'm thinking to myself, like, why is he, if he doesn't want money, why is he going through all of this effort? And you were the first person that came to my mind when I read this story, when I was listening to the story. And I'm thinking, well, why does it matter to him that, he acknowledges him or not? Like, why is that a big deal? If you say you're good, why does it really matter? And he said, and he kept saying, because it is my right for him to take accountability, right? His mother had passed, right? Mother passed on. And it's crazy because he's not asking for money. He's only asked, but with that he wants to be rightful there. If you position yourself the right way, God will allow, that means that will put him ahead of even Blue Ivory, right? Positioning for inheritance. So now I start thinking, I said, so if this young man is his son, that his positioning puts him ahead of all that. Doesn't mean that she doesn't rightfully deserve it. It positions him in a place where he can receive his inheritance when that time that time comes. And I said, is this? And I started to think about you, and I thought this makes sense because, and why, normally for something like that, why wouldn't you just go and just acknowledge and be like, okay, because he has other kids that he had, from what I understand, he has other kids. There was never a fight like that with them. Why is it a fight for him? Because when he positions himself I said to myself, now I get what Thomas is, why he did what he did. Now I understand, because now you can position yourself for wisdom. You can position yourself for an inheritance. So now when you talk to your children, you're coming from, oh my God.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because see, most of the times, and they even did it for me, the first thing we think about is what you said is money. My sisters did it to me. Like, y'all can't give me nothing. But the issue, Nadira, and the challenge is this is a part that we don't talk about, and even in our community, is lineage. See, we put money before lineage. Right, but if I said to you, hey Nadira, what do these names mean to you? Ford, Eisenhower, Trump, right? If I said these names to you, there's some sort of, if I said Carter, who lived to be 100 years old, right? There's some sort of, you don't immediately think of money. What do you think of? You think of lineage.
Yes.
You think of all the people who came before the person who who holds that name in order to make that name relevant. Now, if money is involved, money is a byproduct of lineage.
Wow.
So now when you go one level deep, because I went spiritual. See, I didn't go physical. I went spiritual. And when you understand, when God changes somebody's name in that book with 66 chapters that you talk about, that you read, their life changes. See, that's where I
Oh my
started.
gosh. Oh
Because
my
when you
gosh.
understand Abram was Abram before Abraham, and then now when you look at religious sects, all of those religions came through whose seed? Abraham's seed. But that
Oh
wasn't
my
his original
gosh.
name. When you talk about Sarah, was Sarah before Sarah? When you talk about Jacob, change his name to what? Israel. Like, I could go on and on. That was my angle. You really gotta, for me, I went back spiritually deep to understand what that means in an etymology of words. Lineage,
Wow.
birthright.
Lineage.
Like, what does that mean? People kind of say, well, what does it mean? What is the significance of it? Well, kingdoms have been lost. Lives have been lost over lineage. If you don't think it's
My
relative,
gosh.
study it. It has nothing to do
Wow.
with money. Now, money could be a byproduct, but just like the animals of the wild, they have an inertia, right, inside of them. It's like a homing device. You've never seen an animal in the wild, whether it be a lion, tiger, or bear, elephant. You've never seen them give birth to their seed and that seed not want to be with them. Now, there's instances where the parents push them away for whatever reason, but you never seen that thing that they birth not want to be part of the benefactor that birthed them.
Oh my gosh.
Why would we be any different, Nadira? It don't got
Oh
nothing
my
to do with
gosh.
money. Why would somebody who birthed somebody, the one that
Oh
they
my God.
birthed, not want to understand or be with the person who birthed them? It's inside of them. It's like a homing device. Why you see so many? I apologize. That's my passion talking. I apologize. Why do you see so many stories where people they was adopted, they didn't know their birth parents, and they found out their birth parents, and they found out that they was a twin? Like, all of these stories, but you rarely see the birth parent finding the offspring.
That's true. That's true.
The majority of the time, it's the offspring finding the parent.
That's
money?
true.
Nah, it ain't about money.
Yeah.
It's about a sense of self-worth. Who am I? Everybody asks them that question. Asks that question to themselves. Who am I? Who do I belong to?
Yeah. Because fathers, it's a part, they instill identity. So like we said, with trauma, and identity, fathers instill identity into their children. So that's why you see women who have not grown up, like myself, had not grown up without a father. I grew up with a lot of identity issues, trying to fit into certain categories, trying to find somebody to identify with, because your father, God, we are made, right? We when we're born, we look like, or should look like, our parents or somebody from our family. So we get to attach our identity to what.
Yeah,
okay, I'm getting so excited. I'm like, I keep getting revelation after revelation. But what I realize is that fathers instill identity. So when fathers are in the home and they're present, right? Present emotionally, present physically, right? And what happens is their job to impart, identity into their children, so that when they grow up, they know who they are. That's why back in the Bible days, they could say this person's son of Bar,
Oh
son
yeah,
of Bar,
lineage.
son of
Yeah,
this, son of that.
yeah. You can
It
start in Kings,
mattered.
first and second Kings
Son of
lineage.
this, Simon's son, Simon Bar Jonah, son of this, son of that, right? So when we grow up and we don't have that father there, right, to instill identity, then we look for our identity, especially women
Yeah,
and daughters look for their identity in men,
in the man.
right? In the man, because the man, well, why the man? Why don't they look for their identity in the women? They look for that from the man because identity comes from the men, right? The father, right? The identity comes from the father. So they look for somebody to speak and to actually speak life into them and tell them who they are, right? And when you grow up without that, then you find yourself like kind of just shape shifting into every
Yeah,
kind of
around it.
relationship that you can get. And then what happens is you grow up and then you wind up growing up with all this self-inflicted trauma, right? And I say self-inflicted because when you don't have wisdom, right, and you don't have identity, you wind up running your head into stuff that you like later on, that you look back and be like, "Ooh, had I had this, I wouldn't have had to deal with that." But
Yeah.
even Joseph dealing with the trauma of what he went through, right? And still having to not realizing that when trauma happens, that God can use that, right? If we give it to him, if we give him our trauma, he said he will give us I'm trying to think of that scripture. It was just on the tip of my tongue. Said for the spirit of heaviness, right? He will give us joy for the spirit of heaviness, right? And so when you think about, if we take our trauma and we say, God, here's my trauma. This is what I've experienced. This is what I've gone through. You gave me thank you, Lord, the garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness. So when we take our trauma to him and we allow God to, and in exchange, he gives us what we need to make our spirits lift up, to give him glory. Why else will he give you the garment of praise? Not to praise yourself. It's a positioning, right? We were created in his image. We were created for him, by him, right? In 1 Corinthians chapter 6, we were created for him. So when we give him our trauma, he gives us a garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness. And then what happens is when we allow God to really heal us, when we get out here and we start living this thing called life, it become, now we're a little bit more reluctant to do things our way. Now we having to learn who we are, which is he gives us his identity, right? Now we got to learn who he is, right? So that we can learn how to function in the earth realm and not have to function like bastards, children, right? Because that's what it feels like when your father is married to somebody else and you over here creating children with other people. You feel like the bastard child. You may not have a word for it. You may not even know that it's called bastard child. You just know what you feel like, and then you later on realize, I feel just like a bastard child.
Yeah.
And that's what it's like when you have no identity. When your trauma becomes your identity, you're like the bastard child.
Yeah.
And you wear it like a scarlet letter.
So two things, and if you would have me back, we could go deeper on this second subject that I'm about to talk about. But the first one is, I had the conversation with my daughter, Carolyn, and myself the other day, is that when we changed the name, like when I finally made that decision and changed the name, there was a part that we didn't account for. I definitely didn't account for. And that part was our children understood who they were. Now, at that age, we didn't know that was an issue, right? Because it wasn't really at the forefront, right? They didn't really have low self-esteem. But what happened was, and that's 2005. So Monazi was 5, right? And Darian was probably around 8. But when we changed our name to Taylor, something happened inside of them. Like their confidence increased, their wherewithal, their understanding of who they were. And then we had this conversation with them when, while they was in their 20s, and they's like, yeah, now we realized we were tailors. Now we knew how to write it, because Searles, and nobody knew how to say Searles, and it was always saying it funny, and we didn't really want to say it and really talk about it. But now Taylor, we understand, like, this whole nother level, because I made a decision. Now, if you would have me back, the next thing is, you talked about Joseph. Why was Joseph able to get through all the trauma that he went through? Because he understood what God told him. He had a dream, Nadira, that he held on to.
Yeah.
And I always say it. So there's something that trumps trauma. And you know what trumps trauma? What did God tell you?
What did God tell you?
What did he say to you? What did he challenge you to do? Who did he challenge you to become? When you understand that, that trumps trauma. When you don't know that, trauma leads your life, because that's all you can see. The reason why Joseph became second in command is because he know what God told. He understood the dream. No matter what his brothers said, no matter what Potiphar's wife wanted him to do, he understood the assignment.
That's good.
Anybody under the sound of my voice, if Nadira would have me back, the question is, what did God tell you?
Wow.
If you don't know that answer, if you don't know the answer to that question, I challenge you to go deeper. Slow down. Get quiet. Meditate more. Read some scriptures, whether it be the Bible, the Quran, or just read for a level of understanding, not for knowledge, just a level of understanding for yourself. Because the quieter you get, the deeper you go, you're going to hear a soft whisper of who he told you you were, who he told you you can become. That dream, that vision that you saw that's bigger than you, but then you start to think about your past and you got afraid. You got frightened because you're saying to yourself, that can't be me. Not where I come from. I can't do that. What are they going to say about me? How are they going to treat me? What is my family going to say? But the question is, what did God tell you?
What did God tell you? Wow. So there you have it, guys. What did God tell you? That should be our focus. Our focus should be on figuring out what God has said, because when you figure out what God has said, it will allow you to focus and hone in on what it is that he called you to do. That way you're not wasting a lot of energy and time and directions and going through paths that you were never meant to go down in the first place. And I think what happens is when you understand that, you realize that, and this is something that I had to learn, is going back to taking the time and saying, what did God tell me? And it's easy for us to get spiritual and say, oh, well, he always talking to me. But knowing what God told you is first starting at where it all began, with the word of God, finding out what was his will, what was his plan for man, and then allowing him to take that plan that he has given us in the word of God and showing us how to apply it to today's life. How do I apply that to my home as a parent? How do I apply what he told me in terms of my job or my business or my skill set or my gift? How do I take what God has told me, right, and be able to apply it towards every area of my life? Well, you do that by starting at the beginning, right? When you start at the beginning where it all started, your why is so crucial to you doing, even thinking that you're doing things, right, that are in alignment with what you say you dream about. Your why has to be clarified, because I think when you put, and I remember Coach Tight said this, and I never forget this, you have to deepen your why, because your why is connected to what he tells you to. And he said the deeper your why is, when your why gets to the point where it causes you to cry.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, 7 layers deep. He talked about. Yep.
When
Goes
your
deeper.
why causes you to cry, why does it matter that I cry? Because it means you're dealing with, that means you're going on a deeper level. You're getting past the surface. You're going beyond what you think you can do, but you're going into purpose. Your why is helping you tap into purpose. It's helping you to understand why, why you do what you do, right? And I think about the story with the talents, with the one person who hid his talent, right? And we already know what happens with the person that had the 5 and the 10 talents. But my concern was the one who had the one talent. He knew he knew what God had given him, but it says he was afraid. And he tried to recreate what he think or how God was going to respond to what God gave him. He was expecting, well, God, I know. And then he even got real I know you would come and reap what you haven't sown and do this. And the first thing that God said to him is he called him, he called him wicked. So when you don't, in order for you to, I was thinking to myself, like, that was pretty harsh. She called him wicked, right?
Yeah.
But what made him wicked is that he knew. What makes you disobedient is when you know. To him that knoweth to do good and doeth it not, to him it is sin. So when you know what God has called you to do, your level of accountability changes. Your level of accountability changes. How you deal with life changes. That means you take seriously when God begins to chastise you in certain areas, because your why is changing. Now you understand that it all works together. Yeah, I've been going through this. Yeah, I've been feeling like this, but it's all working together. So if you're watching this broadcast and you are struggling with trauma and it's affecting how you see yourself, it's affecting how you see God, it's affecting how you're looking at your circumstance, I want you to go back and I want you to do what Thomas said. I want you to go back and ask God, what did you ask him? Find out what it is that he want you to do. Because when you start there, I think everything else around that starts to pan out. But if you start seeking after other things before you start seeking about what God wants you to do, you might get a little distance, right? You might make a little money, right? You might have a little temporary peace, but it's going to be fleeting because it's not rooted to anything, right? And that's what's happening. You're seeing people fall apart at the seams because their peace is not rooted in God, right? Their goals are not rooted in God. Their purpose is not rooted because they don't know what he told them. So if you want to know, if you want to know how to be successful, truly successful, find out what God called you to do. T, you got any last final words before we end?
Hey, it's been a plum pleasing pleasure. If you guys want to find me and follow me, you can follow me on Instagram.
Yes.
Thomas Taylor III. My YouTube channel is Taylor Your Dreams. My
Yes.
Facebook is Thomas Taylor III. I'm actually working on a podcast, talking about if I knew my father. And my goal is to have my book published and released 30 days from today. So
Well, I
stay
hope I get
tuned.
the first interview.
It comes out. Yep. I certainly will be back, and you most certainly will. So it's been a plum pleasing pleasure. And slow down for a moment, ladies and gentlemen, and
Yes.
really think about the things that we talked about, because there is greatness inside of you. And sometimes we allow the things in our past to kind of cloud our vision, right? We always talk about
Yes.
when you drive in your car, like, why is your windshield larger than your rear view mirror? Because somewhere somebody realized that your future is bigger and brighter than your past.
All right, there you have it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we will see you next week. Don't forget to make sure that you like and share. Uh-oh, what happened? Okay. Make sure you like and share, and make sure if you know somebody that can benefit from the podcast. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Have an amazing day and night.
Peace. Yep.